This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Haulin Assets podcast, episode number 121. I'm tempted to title this one Eat Your Peas. Okay, or eat your greens, because that's kind of what we're going to be doing today. But before we get there, I am Craig, your host for today, and Chris is with me over there on the couch. How's it going?
Good. It's good to see you, Craig.
Yeah, you too. It's been a little while. You know, a little peek behind the curtains. Last time we recorded 2 episodes at once, and so Chris and I haven't seen each other in weeks. And,
it's been weeks.
You know, I was starting to get the shakes and get some withdrawals. I was like, I need some more Chris in my life. So
yeah, that's probably not true.
I'm glad you're back. So before we get started, everybody go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com for full show notes, etc., comments on episodes. You can find us on Facebook, and please leave a review if you enjoy these episodes. MotorCarrierHQ.com. I knew I was forgetting something. If you want some tools, some resources, you want an actual human to talk to over the phone, go to MotorCarrierHQ.com and find those resources there.
With all that bling, I'm surprised you forgot about that. Wasn't that supposed to remind you?
I'd say, so for those watching on YouTube, I told Chris I'm double repping today. I've got the hat. I've actually got a trucker hat and the t-shirt from Motor Carrier HQ. This was not planned. The hat was planned, but I threw the t-shirt on this morning, and it was a happy coincidence.
Yeah, because you didn't even know we were recording this morning.
I didn't.
Wow.
So that's how much I care about this show,
you
Chris.
Do care. 24/7 you wear it? That's
absolutely
one of your 2 t-shirts.
So today, it's like I said, it's the Eat Your Peas episode, because, you know, sometimes some episodes they're fun and exciting. They're the I don't know, the candy,
the spice in life.
There you go. Yeah. There's something like that. But this is very much like it sounds boring, okay? Because it's workers' compensation and occupational accident insurance. Okay, that's not going to get anybody all that excited as a title. But if you are running your own company, maybe it's just you and you're looking to expand. Maybe you have a few employees already, but you're not up to speed on this type of thing. This is exactly the kind of episode that you need.
And workers' compensation is kind of deceiving, because even if you're an owner-operator, you've got your own truck, you're driving it, and there's nobody else,
still have to have it.
Still have to have it.
Yep. Which, you know, it isn't such a bad idea. See, you know,
it serves its purpose.
Exactly. Anyway, and so I chuckled when Chris sent over the topic for today, but then I stopped and remembered we've done a lot of episodes like this that are really helpful. So everybody pay attention, class.
It's not the most entertaining episode in the world, but it's important. It's something that people need to know. And,
you know, maybe before we talk about that, we should talk about anything else that is entertaining or interesting. Chris, what's going on out on the road these days?
I'm trying to remember if we talked about this in the financial episode last time, because I meant to, but I kind of was going through my notes and I can't remember if I talked about it. But we paid off truck number 1 last month. Yeah,
okay,
so
I think I remember you saying you were going to.
Well, congratulate me again.
Nah. I'm good.
No, once is enough. You're not going to inflate my head any more than it already is.
Congratulations, Chris.
Melanie, my wife, would appreciate that. She'd tell you thanks.
Yeah, well. No, that's always exciting news. It's one more expense off of the P&L every month. Yeah. So that is excellent. Congratulations,
Thank
Chris.
you.
All right. Anything else going on?
I-80 is a mess right now in Wyoming.
Hang on. I'm going to clip that 3 seconds where you said I-80 is a mess right now, and just play that at the beginning of every episode, right?
There's probably a lot of the times it'll be very true.
Yeah.
It's a mess somewhere.
Exactly. It's either too snowy or too windy or too something.
Right now in Wyoming, it's nasty. I was just complaining as I was walking in that it was cold. I think this has been probably the coldest day of the year in Utah, and really colder than it sometimes gets some years. But I-80 has been shut down for, I think, going on 3 days now. We have one of our drivers that got about halfway through the state before it got shut down, so he can't leave.
He can't
Go any
my
direction.
gosh.
Yeah, poor guy.
Oh, that's brutal.
Yeah, Greg. I feel sorry for Greg. He's not having the best time right now.
No, I don't imagine. I got locked out of I-80 on the Laramie side once, coming back to Utah. And so I had to go all the way back through Denver and take the back roads.
Yeah.
So
you can't even do that right now.
Yeah. I can imagine. And there was a pileup, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was I think it was like 40 or 50 cars. One person died. So I don't know. I should have read the article, but I think Wyoming had been closed for a while. They opened it up for a little bit. That happened, and it got shut down again.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think it's supposed to. It may have opened in the last few hours. It sounded like they were making some progress on it, and sky's been clear all day. So hopefully it actually did open up and we're moving again.
Yeah. Well, everybody be careful out there.
Yeah.
Because you know what? You don't want to have to take advantage of your workers' compensation and occupational accident insurance, do you, Chris?
No, you don't.
How's that for a transition?
That's a good transition. Except for I'm going to take a step backwards and detransition.
Dang it, Chris.
Because I was thinking, I want to put a little teaser in for the impact tip. Because I think the impact tip is going to be a good one. It's kind of helps answer a question we get a little bit, and it comes to us via Chet, my brother, who's a lot smarter than me. So it's a good one.
Can confirm.
Yeah. You've interacted with both, Yeah.
All right, Chris. Well, after my A+ transition that you completely ruined, let's hear yours. How do you want to get into this?
Let's just jump right in. There we go. Yeah.
Fair enough. So, workers' comp and occupational accident insurance. These are two separate things.
They're two separate things. They're two kind of different types of insurance that really serve very similar purposes, kind of do a very similar thing. It's just you typically get them in different situations. And one disclaimer I want to make as we're kind of jumping into this subject is I'm going to talk about my experience with Haulin assets and workers' compensation in the state of Utah. The rules for both of these types of coverages are different in every state. Probably 80% of what I'm going to talk about is applicable everywhere. But there's that other 20%, kind of some of the nuances that are a little bit, the laws and the rules are different state to state. So you need to make sure that you go to your state agency, somebody, and we'll talk a little bit about who you can talk to learn more at the end. But the state agency on insurance, like your division of insurance, is a good place to start. I've got a link in the notes where you can click on and see who one of those contacts is within your state.
Okay, good. All right. So what are both of these things, Chris?
So workers' compensation insurance, they're both really designed to do a really similar thing. If you get injured on the job or you get sick because of your job or something happens to you while you're on the job, it covers the majority of your medical expenses, and it typically will also pay you a little bit of a wage while you're unable to work, so you don't starve and die.
Right. Now, when you say, okay, so that's workers' comp, and then when we switch over to occupational accident insurance, that sounds like the exact same thing, but they're different?
It is the exact same thing. And some states you can have one or the other. Some states, there's, workers' compensation usually has a little bit more extensive coverage than occupational accident does. And in some states you can pick or choose which one you want. In some states, you're kind of mandated depending on what the use is for. Like that's kind of the case in Utah, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So it depends. And usually workers' compensation is a little bit more expensive than occupational accident, but usually the coverage is a little bit better too.
And are either of these state, like public programs, or are these are both privately run?
Some states have public programs for it. Some states are all private. Utah's actually is kind of quasi-public private. It's called the Work Comp Fund of Utah that probably carries 80% of the workers' compensation insurance, whether it's in trucking or other industries throughout the entire state.
Got it. Okay. So are these expensive to carry, or is it kind of not too
Depends
bad?
on what you consider expensive, Craig.
Well, you've seen the size of my house. It's all expensive, Chris.
It kind of depends. I can tell you Haulin assets, it's kind of hard to say exactly. We're going to get a little bit into the cost breakdown, but Haulin assets right now we have to do workers' compensation insurance because we've got employees, and that's kind of the requirement in Utah if you've got employees. And it's roughly about $275 a month per driver.
$275 per month per driver.
Yep.
That doesn't sound cheap.
It's not cheap.
Okay.
When I was driving and it was just me, I was able to do occupational accident insurance, and that was only about $138 a month.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
so half as much if you're just insuring yourself.
Correct.
Is that because you were the sole owner-operator, or is there some way that you could now do occupational accident with all these drivers?
No,
You say it's
you have to
required
do workers' compensation.
in Utah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So what else do we need to know about it then? It's how do you get it? Where do you go?
So you usually get it most of the time, and this is a great resource if you want to learn a little bit more about the specifics in your state, is through your truck insurance agent. They usually have access to workers' compensation policies, and a good truck insurance agent is also going to be very versed on workers' compensation and occupational accident, and they'll be able to kind of tell you the pros and cons, what the requirements are in your state, and point you that way. So they're a great resource for that. And that's where you typically get it. Like even in Utah, where you've got this quasi work comp fund of Utah, I can either get the coverage through my insurance agent, but it's still carried by the work comp fund, or I can go directly to the work comp fund and get it through them. The price doesn't change whether I do it one way or the other. So it's typically just easiest to do it through your agent because they can kind of educate you, monitor it, help you make the best decision. And so that's kind of what I recommend. Go to your insurance agent.
And when you do that, so you go to your insurance agent, they'll point you in the right direction. What are they going to ask you for? What's the process? Do you have to have this or that documentation? Do you have to go through
they'll kind of
audits and stuff like that?
They'll kind of go through the rules. So like in Utah, you as an owner operator, you can do workers' compensation instead of occupational accident. So they'll kind of help you pick the pros and cons. Or in my situation, if you want to do occupational accident instead, you have to do what's called a work comp waiver. As an owner operator, I'm all by myself. I can opt out of workers' compensation. So you have to fill out a form saying you're doing that. You send it to the Department of Labor in Utah along with a $50 fee. You have to do this every year, saying, hey, I want to be exempted and opt out of workers' compensation insurance. And as part of that, you actually have to show proof that you have occupational accident insurance. So you can't have neither. You've got to have one or the other.
Okay. All right. Tell me more about the process then. When you when you go and sign up, what are they going to ask you for?
Just basic company information. One of the things, especially if you're going to do workers' compensation, that they're going to ask for is what you're paying in wages, like annual salaries roughly, because that's actually one of the big things that they do to calculate the costs that they're going to charge. It's based off of how much you pay in wages. And so let's kind of jump into that. Let's talk a little bit about the costs and how the cost is determined. So occupational accidents kind of more of a flat rate. It's not as complicated. It's typically, this is how much you're going to pay.
Right.
Whereas workers' compensation insurance, there's really kind of three aspects that go into that. One is, like I already talked about, the wage, how much you pay. Two is what industry you're in. So if you're a truck driver, or industry / what kind of job you've got. If you're hiring and employing all truck drivers, your insurance is going to be a lot more expensive than if it's an office worker. And that makes sense.
Right.
Likelihood of an office worker getting injured versus a truck driver getting injured, not very likely. I mean, paper cuts in the office.
The 80 car pile up in the HR department.
Yeah, that doesn't happen. Yeah, typically. I mean, Terry Tate, the office linebacker, if you've got one of those in your office, you might be more likely to get hurt. You're staring at me like you don't know what I'm talking about.
It's ringing a bell, but you're too old for me.
Go look it up on YouTube. It's it was a good commercial once upon a time. Anyway, so that's a big one. And then the last thing that is like the big main factor in how they calculate your workers' compensation is your claims history. Like, how have you had a lot of drivers file claims because they're getting hurt a lot, meaning like you probably have a bad safety culture and guys are getting hurt all the time, then you're going to end up paying more in workers' compensation.
You're filing for every little thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are kind of the big three. If you're a brand new company and you've never gotten workers' compensation insurance before, they just kind of have this generic claims factor logarithm, whatever you want to call it, that they're going to use to calculate what you're charged.
And is this all just based on your self-reporting? So you fill out the form, you give it to them, or is there any sort of follow-up, audit, whatever?
That's a great question. There actually is. There's follow-up and an audit. So you tell them when you first apply, hey, this is how much I pay in wages. You give them all that information. You fill out the application, and then a year later, they're going to come back and they're going to audit you. They're going to typically require you to send in your payroll documentation to show how much you actually did pay in wages. And you've got to provide them proof that that's what it is. And then at the end of the audit, if you've underpaid, guess what they're going to do?
They're going to charge you.
They're going to charge you. And it's one big lump sum that you've got to come up with all of a sudden if you're way off.
Woof.
Yeah.
So be honest.
Be honest. And in the long run too, like if say you underpaid, or you overpaid, they will refund you the money.
Okay.
So in our situation,
that's not a strategy you would want to try to go with.
It's not. Like you try to estimate it accurately so you're not surprised one way or the other at the end of the year. Haulin Assets I think it was our second or third year in business, probably our third year in business, where we were growing quite a bit. Because we weren't staying on top of our notifying the work comp fund every time we hired a new driver, we kind of failed there. We didn't do as good a job as we should. And we frankly kind of underestimated the wages. And again, you're kind of estimating. You don't know how many miles a driver is going to drive in a year. You don't know exactly how much they're going to earn. And we underestimated the wages, both in how much we actually paid and how many drivers we had on the road. And we actually ended up having a pretty decent bill at the end of the year that we had to fork out because we underpaid.
Wow. Okay. How much was it?
I'm trying to remember. It was a pretty significant number. It was like $8,000, I think.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I think I'm pretty sure we talked about it in a P&L because it hit our P&L.
Right. I do seem to remember something like that. Okay, good. So, Chris, do you have to get we said this in most states, all states, you have to have this insurance, one or both, or I guess either type of insurance. What are the benefits? I mean, there's the obvious one, but why else would you get it?
It really, one, it's the law typically. And I think I'm assuming in every state, I don't know this for certain, but I would be willing to bet that in every state there is some kind of law that for the most part you have to have workers' compensation insurance. So that's number one. And then two, obviously it protects you and your drivers. If a driver gets hurt and their medical expenses are covered and they're getting some kind of wage while they're out of work, everybody's a little bit happier than if that's not the case.
Right.
And this is actually one of the triggers that gets a lot of companies in trouble. That we've talked a little bit about this in the past, companies that hire 1099 contractors, subcontractors instead of employees. They treat their drivers as subcontractors and not employees. This is where it causes a problem, because if they hire them as a subcontractor, if they're a true subcontractor, they can typically get out of workers' compensation, do the occupational accident.
The company can. The driver should.
The driver should get it themselves, but oftentimes they don't. Mm-hmm. And so they're driving, they get in an accident, they get injured, and all of a sudden there's no mechanism to pay the medical bills. They're not getting any kind of wage while they're out of work, and they're like, well, I should have got this. I was working for you. What happened? And so then that starts as a lawsuit because they weren't covered under workers' comp. And then they'll say, I was really an employee. I wasn't a contractor. I was treated like an employee. And in most situations, they're right. Like the boxes didn't get checked correctly for them to be legally classified as a contractor. Okay.
And I remember, gosh, it was probably 3-4 years ago now that several states were cracking down on 1099s, misclassifying employees as contractors, when it's like, clearly this is an employee of your company. You're just classifying them for your own reasons in this way, and it's screwing them over, and it's screwing the state over. It's clogging up the legal system, whatever. So they started cracking down.
California a year or so ago passed a bill that actually makes it like basically impossible to hire somebody as a contractor.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
Because it is useful.
Even it is useful, and there are circumstances and situations for it. And a lot of the time in trucking, it makes sense to do that, especially like if a truck driver comes to the company to haul stuff for you and they bring their own truck, like they probably should be a subcontractor. But now in California, it's like next to impossible to be able to do that.
Interesting. All right, Chris. Well, anything else we need to know about these two topics?
Not so much. Just make sure you learn about the specifics from your state. You can go to, like I said, your state's Division of Insurance, or you can talk to your insurance agent. And then just another good, simple way of doing it is just your average search engine. Google knows a lot. Search, workers' compensation in the state of Georgia, or Google occupational accident insurance in Texas. Just make a search for your state with those, and you can learn quite a bit.
Okay, well, very good. Chris, impact tip. You were pretty excited about this one. I was going to say, what do you got? But what has Chet got for us today?
So the impact tip itself is get your hook in the water.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. It's been a pleasure. I have no idea what that means.
I want to explain it, Craig.
What does that mean?
So basically, that means a lot of people, especially this time of year, ask us, "Hey, is now the right time to start a trucking company?" And you think right now there's a lot of uncertainty in the economy. Freight rates aren't as good as they traditionally have been. They're kind of on the lower end. Is it a good time? Is it not a good time? And in reality, so Chet and I were talking a lot about this, and Chet made some really good points. And we kind of came to the determination that the right time for anybody to start a trucking company, or really any company for that matter, is when the time is right for them and when they've prepared and they're ready. They've prepared, like a lot of the things that we've talking about, having good financial situation, especially on the personal side. When you're ready to do it. Because we've both seen a lot of people, we kind of feel like 80% of your likelihood of success depends on you and your attitude. The other 20% is
market rates,
and things that are kind of out of your control. So 80% is you, your abilities, and your preparation. The other 20% is really the market and some other things that are out of your control. Because we've seen lots of people who have started a trucking company when times are really lean and the economy's struggling, that have been very successful. And we've seen other guys who have started companies when the economy's roaring, things are going really well, and they fell. And the difference is that level of preparation and the person's really their tenacity and their abilities and
their basic knowledge as well. The whole point of this podcast really is to give people some basic tools. I mean, today is, I guess it is kind of basic. It's very specific, but it's like, this is a thing you need to know about. So I hope people have found this podcast valuable, but there are lots of other resources out there too. I'll bet you $100, Chris, that there's a really great book out there called Starting a Business for Dummies. And I'll tell you what, I'll tell you a story. When I started my very first podcast back in 2009, I bought Podcasting for Dummies, and took me through my first 2 years of podcasting.
Nice.
It's, and I've used that series, so I bring it up as only a mild joke, because resources like that can help you get your hook in the water, as you say, Chris. Yeah. So what does the analogy mean?
So I want to kind of leave everybody with one thought, and this is where kind of the analogy comes in.
Yeah.
When you're fishing, do you like fishing?
Yeah, I love fishing.
Good. When you're fishing, you want your hook in the water when the fish initially start to bite. Because if you don't, if you wait, let's say you wait until the fish start biting to go get your rod, to go get the bait, to get the rest of your tackle, then to bait your hook, and then you throw it in the water, you've missed out on a lot of opportunity. And you may have missed out on everything. The fish may have stopped biting by the time you get the hook in. And so you want your hook in the water when the fish start biting. And so it's kind of the same thing in business. If it takes a long time to get a trucking company up and rolling, and it really takes a long time to get it up to where it's operating kind of more at peak capacity. We've talked about those first 30 days, those first 60 days. really 6 months when not every broker is going to talk to you and things are a little bit tougher. A lot of the times it's better just to kind of suffer through that when it's hard, so that when the time gets really good, you're ready to set the hook.
Okay, so let me see if I can restate this and make sure I understand. Start the company. If you are ready to start the company, start the company. Don't worry about the market as much. Obviously, well, okay, you got to worry about it a little bit. You got to know what's going on, but don't let that deter you, because you want to be rolling when things get good.
Yeah.
You don't want to miss out on the what's the opposite of lean times? The fat times,
the fat
Chris.
times, yeah.
Right.
And you see that happen all the time. Like everybody kind of, we follow the herd, right? We're herd animals as humans. And so everybody's always jumping in at the same time. And so oftentimes what happens is, you wait and you wait and you wait, and then you finally say, okay, things are really, really good, I'm going to do it. And you get in, you get going. And by the time you get in and you kind of get cranking, things have slacked off. And so in my opinion, you want to be ready when the times get good. And, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know if 2023 at some point this year, things are going to turn around and be a lot better. They might not. But, we started Haulin Assets in a market that wasn't the greatest market in 2019. 2018 was great. 2019 wasn't so good. And we just kind of, that first year in almost any circumstance is not going to be the easiest year. And, we kind of suffered through it, and we've been able to kind of take advantage since.
You've talked about it before. Start your company, get going, get out on the road. And if it's a great economy at the time and rates are really high, congratulations. You've got a great opportunity to stash away some extra cash, right? If you start it and the economy's down, then you've got a great opportunity to buckle down on your discipline, your business skills, and make sure that when times do get a lot better, then you are that you have the habits in place to actually take full advantage of that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that early on in the podcast, Chris. I've never forgotten it.
And it kind of reminds me of my grandpa. My grandpa grew up during the Great Depression, and a lot of those habits he developed because of the difficult times of the Great Depression. He used and kind of continued on throughout the rest of his life. And he was a pretty successful guy, and even though he may not have ever really earned a ton of money, because of the good habits that he developed and that he continued to live by.
There you go. All right, everybody, there's your impact tip. Get your hook in the water. And if you have any other questions about occupational, what was it? Occupational accident insurance, workers' comp, then listen to the episode again, or hop on Google or talk to your insurance agent, and they'll tell you all about it. Chris, parting thoughts?
I think that's a wrap.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Don't forget to head to HaulinAssetsLLC.com. Go to motorcarrierhq.com. I almost looked at myself in the screen there to double check which thing I'm supposed to be talking about. Motorcarrierhq.com. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Craig.